Welcome everybody, this is Tim Watrous, President of Digital Advisors.
And this is Kevin Gordon, President of Capital Advisors Group.
We'd like to welcome you to our K-12 Politics and Tech video series.
Our objective is to give you the absolute latest of what's going on in Sacramento that affects public school districts, obviously, and as well as all the technology stuff that's going on that's so vital to delivering for kids these days.
And remember, if you find these videos useful, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and share out over social media. You're our marketing team. We appreciate your support, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, welcome everybody. Tim Watrous, President of Digital Advisors, back with another episode of K-12 Politics and Tech. As always, co-host of the show, Kevin Gordon, President of Capital Advisors, is here. Kevin, glad to have you back.
Great to be with you, Tim.
Yeah, so, independent study was a big topic last time. That continues to be the case, and it's been a couple of weeks. So can you fill us in on the latest in the governor's office with the independent study, please?
Yeah, it continues to be number one hot topic among school districts across the state as the frustration level gets even greater. And it's just because districts are just juggling lots of different moving parts here. So one of the things that we had put together, and I think we announced that we were in the throes of putting together a meeting with top levels of folks in the governor's office. So we had not just, the governor's chief deputy cabinet secretary, Ben Cheetah, but we also had Joey Freeman of the governor's office. We had Brooks Allen from the State Board of Education. We had key people from the Department of Finance, all across the administration really joining the call, along with, as we hosted it, the executive directors of Access. So Wes Smith was on, Vernon Billy from CSBA, Tasha Davenport, the exec director of CASBO. We had Derek Lennox, who was with CSESA, the County Superintendents Association, and Tim Taylor of the small school districts. So we had a really good cast of folks from the K-12 side as well as the governor's office to help articulate what we're all hearing from our various constituencies across the state about the frustration with all the rules. One of the things, it was actually ended up being a really good call. Not that, we're going to get everything we would want in terms of a legislative cleanup bill, but the disposition of the Newsom administration relative to sort of cracking down on or the gotchas that could potentially be, involved with the implementation of this law, we heard good things. And so I'll essentially give you the summary of it. The objective is to make sure that school districts have flexibility in this for short-term independent study when it comes to the money that's involved. So the idea is that school districts need to have a plan for independent study. If they have the plan for independent study, the degree of fidelity to that plan and how much they are showing evidence of what they did with regard to implementing that independent study and the synchronous instruction and all the rules that are around it, all of that stuff is not going to be their focus. They said, we are not going to be focused on trying to drag money away from local school districts or penalize school districts. We simply are going to be looking to see if you had a plan. Now, how that plan gets implemented is less of their concern than did you have a plan. That represents some pretty good flexibility for us. So when you've got kids that you're quarantining and you've got to turn on the independent study sort of route for them right away, a lot of people have been concerned about those money issues. So they're basically saying, relax on that. Now, tethered to that whole conversation will be the audit guide that's done. As many months from now, we'll be finalizing an audit guide that'll be used to take the look back on this year. What we told Department of Finance, and they seem to be very, very aware of this, is that as they sit at the table to decide what goes into the audit guide for the look at the current year that we start designing next spring, we're going to need their help to not have it laden with a bunch of, scrutiny over issues they've said they're going to give us flexibility on now. And they basically have committed to that. So I think we're going to get some of the relief that we need now. We're going to get it when it comes to how that audit guide comes together. The key is do the very best job that you can in the circumstances of whether you've got fires going on or whether you've got issues with regard to quarantining in bigger numbers than we ever expected. The short-term independent study is a tool that we think you're going to be able to use, and you're going to be able to use it with a good deal of flexibility without worrying about the fiscal penalties. So that's on that issue. On longer term independent study, these are going to be for the families and students that say, we're not coming back. We want to use independent study for the foreseeable futures, maybe the entire semester. That still has a lot of problems with it, and it particularly has problems with regard to special ed. We're articulating a lot of these issues in, pretty sort of heated discussions over at the Capitol building with the eye toward trying to get some flexibility into the law before the legislature leaves. They are literally finishing their final weeks for the year, and we want them to try to do some things that would give us some relief on this issue. So we've got a lot of that stuff happening. Anyway, so a lot of moving parts here, Tim. A lot of anxiety about staffing needs that are exacerbating the situation. We've got huge problems with regard to staffing. We've got contact tracing that continues to be a requirement as school districts are trying to juggle the need to do contact tracing. It's like, when are we supposed to be doing the instruction? Again, lots of frustration right there as school districts are getting started back up for the year.
Well, thanks for that, Kevin. And I guess there is a little bit of relief in there because the tension around how much accountability sounds like there's a little bit of relief there for folks who may have been really worried about that. I
Yeah.
guess the other thing that is a big concern is just now that school districts are also required to be testing centers of some kind, and they don't necessarily have the infrastructure in place to do all that. So just another thing that people have to try to work through and solve. But definitely appreciate the update there, and we'll be looking forward to more updates from you as this kind of unfolds. I guess one thing that just jumps out at me is you talked about reduced or basically school districts that have lost some students, and some have lost a great number of students, and now school districts can add I guess some sort of promotional campaign to try to get people to come back to their list of things to do. So
Yes.
we feel, sorry, go ahead, please.
No, that's a really important issue, Tim, that you raise about the whole issue about this dramatic decline in ADA that we're seeing off of the numbers that people expected there to be. And the question is that, hopefully that is not sustained throughout this year, but there is a very big drop and people are really worried about that drop. So one of the things I wanted to remind people of is you do have that principle that's sort of embedded into school finance in California, that you get whatever the actual is for this year in terms of attendance or prior year. That's still operational. So you'll still be able to use prior year ADA numbers, which, because we were in that COVID year, it was a hold harmless year. It reverts to the 2019-20 ADA figures. So you do have sort of a worst case scenario kind of situation where you won't get worse off than you were in 2019-20 with regard to ADA. Now, if the legislature chose in the next few days to actually implement some kind of additional hold harmless like we did last year, of course, without the complications of capping enrollment growth, we hope. But if they did do something extra, it would actually give us some insulation for the 2022-23 fiscal year, which a lot of districts are nervous about. So there are conversations about that going on. So important that you brought that up.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Kevin. And again, we feel for all of our leader friends out there that are trying to navigate, all these challenges and get kids back into school and keep people safe. So keep up the great work out there, everybody, and hopefully we'll settle into the school year and hit a nice stride here. With that, Kevin, we've been tracking DC, and there's a couple big initiatives back there. Really, basically, just solidifying the budget has been kind of like a hot topic, and then the Biden infrastructure plan. Both seem to be on the table. Both seem to be making some momentum. Just give us a quick little overview of the latest on both of those, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and so we're seeing action out of the House of Representatives that's positive. It looks like things are moving, but at the end of the day, it is a two-house dynamic. So the Senate is going to have to agree with the House and vice versa. They are holding both major packages together. They're trying to keep them combined. There are actually moves afoot by some Democrats to actually add in some additional items there with regard to voting rights protections and other issues that have some level of controversy to them. But the bottom line is that the latest conversation has been about the size of the budget reconciliation package at 3.5 trillion, with broad expectations that some negotiation is going to happen to make that smaller in order for it to be acceptable to Democrats like Senator Sinema from Arizona, who said that it's too big and she would not vote to support it. They need every single one of their Democrat votes. So Bernie Sanders, who then retorted back that, I'm done kind of negotiating this and the package should actually be bigger than 3.5 trillion. So, a lot of rhetoric bouncing around a little bit. That means it's obviously not time yet for us to see final votes on this. The debate will continue. We think the likelihood that that package ends up getting smaller is highly likely because they're going to give something on it, I think, to the degree that we benefit from different components of this legislation, what we've talked about before, not in a direct way, but issues like, for example, on the Title I funding, the special ed funding, some of those really key increases that are part of this package. Those are going to be really important. And we think those are somewhat insulated from some of the other things that are a little bit more vulnerable. But we'll see what happens. So the debate continues, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, thanks, Kevin. We'll keep everyone updated on both of those fronts. A news story we've covered very thoroughly on this broadcast is the FCC trying to help close the digital divide with schools. They came out with the Emergency Connectivity Fund, $7 billion that was set aside for schools to buy laptops, devices, hotspots, internet connectivity. The window came and went. We talked about it on the last episode. We expected there would be dollars left over, and that is the case. Out of the $7 billion, $5 billion was basically procured at this point, and there's $2 billion still available. So with that in mind, the FCC is going to open a new window starting September 28th, closing October 13th. So it's going to be a very quick turnaround as it was last time. I want to just say that make sure, if you haven't yet, there were a lot of folks in districts that I know that just were too many things on their plate at this time. You have about a month to get this application ready to be submitted. And that means you need to get some surveys together to find out how many of your folks actually need a new device and need connectivity. And remember, this is a adequate device that's going to last over the next 3 years. So thinking down the road, how robust does a device need to be? And if you remember on the last show, we expected this to happen. We said, go ahead and get those surveys out. So if you did, kudos to you for getting those surveys ready. But everyone that I talked to that didn't put the application in, that was the major sticking point for them. So if you do have some bandwidth and time and you can get your team together to do these surveys, there is another window that's going to open. There is a significant amount of dollars there for students, and you have about a month to act here on top of all the other things you have on your to-do list. So please take advantage of that. If you need more information, we'll put a little link in underneath the video, and that'll go out to the email that goes out after the show as well. So, Kevin, I know there's some remaining legislative items for the rest of the year here. Maybe you can just kind of fill us in on those before we wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, the legislature, again, is closing down. They will be done on the 10th of September. And so what we're seeing in these final weeks are different kinds of deadlines. And so the deadline as of today, which is this week, it happened all during this week, was the fiscal deadline. And then really the end of, basically they have hearings, and then they go into sort of this black box of what we call suspense file, which is for the leadership in both houses to decide what's going to come out of those appropriations committees and move forward. And there were about 500 bills that were in the appropriations committees of the two houses. All of that's been essentially decided now, what's going to be held for, another year, and what bills are actually going to move forward. A lot of the bills that are going to move forward are bills that we've reported on before. The ethnic study bills by Medina is moving forward. That passed out. So now that heads to the floors of both houses. I have very little doubt that legislation is going to end up passing and being on the governor's desk. You've got, other legislation as it relates to the layoff date in March that we've all talked about. This is that Eloise Reyes bill with regard to requiring that classified employees get that same requirement of a March layoff that we have for certificated employees. That seems to be moving. There are a number of other pieces of legislation that are in our updates, and most of our clients are getting that you see it. My real point is that at this point in the legislative process, they are done with hearings. So no more committee hearings. That means all of the action will be in the floors of the Senate and the Assembly. So the assembly dispenses with a whole bunch of bills that are Senate bills. The opposite house deals with, the Senate will deal with assembly bills. And then any amendments will get traded back to the other house so that all language that's been approved is concurred in by both houses before it goes down to the governor. So a lot of horse trading over the next week or so as we get to the final end of the current year. Then we're in the middle of a 2-year legislative session, meaning that anything that does not move isn't necessarily dead. It's dead for this year, but it could be resurrected next year. And will be the final year of a 2-year legislative session that they get back to work on that in January. But we'll also have a real comprehensive report of all the legislation that ends up moving to the governor's desk. And then once the governor does act, we put together a report for all of our clients by area of the superintendent's cabinet, so that you'll see, if you're in charge of HR, you'll see all those HR bills. If you're in charge of curriculum instruction, you'll see all of those bills that relate to you, instead of having to wade through all of the bills together. So we've got sort of a busy several weeks left of all of that process as we wind up the current legislative year. So yeah, lots of bills still being bandied about at the Capitol.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Kevin, and we'll look forward to getting more updates on this in future broadcasts. And want to say thanks everybody for tuning into these, and thanks for the people that reach out and tell us that you find them helpful. Please help us spread the word. We're up over 600 subscribers now on our YouTube channel. We went from 0 not long ago to 600, so we appreciate your support. Please help us spread the word, and we hope you all hang in there during these challenging times. Please reach out if there's something that either Kevin or I can do, and we'll look forward to seeing you on a future broadcast. Thanks, Kevin.
Great. Thank you, Tim. So thanks again for joining us for another week of this broadcast.
And I just want to take a moment to remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and share this out over social media. Again, you're our marketing team. I'll also finish by saying, if you have some questions, please send them our way. We'd be happy to address them on a future broadcast. So with that, thanks everybody, and we'll talk soon.